Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, Life, Law, Bin.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the interview stage,
Mhm.
how do you think you can make yourself stand out at that interview?
At the interview stage, it, there are um, there are certain tips that I suppose I could give, and there are certain kind of like staple things that you should really do. So start off with staple things. You need to prep. Some people think that the best thing you can do is not prep. Don't listen to those people. Learn as much as you can about the chambers. Don't over prep. Don't get to the point where you're just reciting answers. You know that they're going to ask certain questions, so you're reciting answers. Have a look at the kind of have a look on the student room at the kind of stuff that they might have asked the year before. Ask any friends that you know that applied from them the year before. Know where the kind of the direction is going, so that you can get into the mindset and do a bit of prep. Research in their practice areas. Keep on top of the news. So what in terms of preparing for that type of thing, I was not only going through my own applications every day and like highlighting them, drawing lines between the competencies for a barrister and my experiences, and annotating my applications. But I was also staying on top of the news as much as I could. BBC News, I read The Guardian, I paid for The Times for a couple of months, and I was looking at various other different sort of legal sources. I think Counsel magazine, that's a great one. Stay on top of your barrister type of news, and having a look at the Supreme Court judgments that were coming out at that type of time. The Guardian's got a great sort of law section and crime section as well, so that was super helpful. And yeah, so have two or three papers that you read digitally or in hard copy, and vary them depending on where you're applying. If you're applying to commercially sets, you're going to be wanting to read the FT, Financial Times, and if you're applying to crime sets, you might be more kind of like I say, Guardian type of thing. The Times is super helpful for prep. It has this thing, if you pay for it, and you can get it kind of cheap for 8 weeks. I think it's something like, if I remember right, when I did it, it was something like £5 for 8 weeks of this thing called the legal brief or the law brief, Times brief, and it sends you 8:30 every morning. It sends you all of the top sort of UK law and international law news in one brief, and it gives you briefs for each of those stories, and then you can click on them and go into the bigger things. If you can manage to muster the money up to pay for that, like please do. I can't recommend it enough. It was super helpful. And then as soon as I was done with my interviews, I cancelled it because then it hikes up. So like bear that in mind. I think it hikes up to £40, something like that a month, which is quite expensive. So don't fall into that trap if you can't afford it. That's one thing that I did in terms of prep. So that's the kind of like general. Now there's certain things that I also did to convey the best version of me, and that's something that so I had a mentor from Freshfields, Annette Byron is her name, and she sort of ran the program that I was talking about earlier, the Stephen Lawrence program. She still does, and she's a really good friend and a good mentor of mine. And she always talks about conveying. Interviews are about conveying the best version of yourself. It's about being a professional version of you and the best version of you. It's not about lying. It's not about pretending to be a barrister or whatever a barrister is, pretend to be this barrister. It's just about putting your best foot forward in a professional way. And one thing that I was taught in the course of it was my time at Goldman's actually is this Superman method. So I would and they taught us to kind of be more confident in interviews, be more confident when you're speaking. Go and stand in front of a mirror, get a good posture, and they call it the Superman posture. Good posture, literally pose like Superman if that helps. Chest out, head up, and just take some deep breaths, and then carry that with you into interview. And that gives you a level. And I did it. I did it in almost every interview, with the exception of the interviews that I was rolling in from one interview to the next, and I had 2 minutes to sort of recalibrate before going in, I'd go to the bathroom before I went to the interview, and I would stand in front of the mirror and I'd get a good posture and I'd breathe, and I would carry that confidence with me through into the room. Because one of the biggest things that you'll do when you step into the room is your voice will drop, your chest will get tight, you'll get a dry mouth, and and your nerves sort of permeate through your skin. And that's one way to kind of try and combat that. So that's a tell all, disclose all tip from me that I did, and it worked for me. And that ties to the kind of advice, which is you need to be confident, not cocky, but confident. You're applying to be an advocate at the end of the day. You need to be able to persuade, and people that are consumed by their own nerves are not very persuasive. And that's one way. That's if I had to say anything, that's the key thing that you could probably do to control yourself in terms of interview. You can't control what they're going to ask, but you can control how you answer it.
That's a very good point, because I know nerves always are there, and I think the trick is you have to kind of learn how to
Mm.
deal with it. So I know I remember I was watching a movie, this was years ago, and it just stuck with me. The person was saying that they control their nerves by actually having a pin, like a safety pin, just having that in their hands. And obviously they're behind a podium. Obviously we may not be behind a podium, but just you have to know yourself and know your tick. So maybe something as obvious as a shaking leg, you might have
Mm.
to make a conscious effort
Yeah.
not to shake.
Absolutely. There are so many different things that you can do. And if you have to do stand-up advocacy, fidgeting, that's another one, which you probably will have to do some advocacy in an interview. When it's over Zoom, it'll be a bit different. You probably do it sat down. But when it's back in person again, if you're applying next year, I scrunched my toes up so that I stopped fidgeting. That's another tip that I was taught. And it stops you if you focus on scrunching your toes up, you stop moving around. And that's kind of like an American way. If I stop thinking, I'll start moving around the room. So yeah, definitely that's one thing. Learn what your tics are. Try these different methods. The Superman thing, I thought that's stupid. I'm not going to do it, and then I did it, and it worked. The another one. So another quick tip is answer the question. Now that's a general tip, but my particular tip as to how to do it is always take pen and paper in with you and write it down. Even if you just write down, you take a pen and you write down one, two, and then you write down the kind of first word of whatever it is that they said, because you kind of listen to the same question at all. Like I remember getting asked a lot about Shamima Begum. And they'd ask a double barrel question. Should we revoke citizenship? And if we do, what are the ramifications for other people? And so I would just write down one, revoke, two, ramifications, or rams, and quick shorthand even does rams and whatever. And that really helped me to stay on top. And they like to see that because it means, and they do that on purpose. On purpose, they will ask collateral questions or conjoined questions, and they do it on purpose to make sure that you're answering the question. You'll listen to everything that's being asked, and if they can see you writing it down and then coming back to it, interviewers seem to like that.
No, that's super helpful. I think this is actually quite novel in terms of this helpful tip is quite novel. I've been to quite a few webinars, but I think this is quite unique because even me just thinking about writing it down, somehow even with case analysis, when you write down your chronologies or you start to analyze the case and you jot down your own shorthand, somehow
Yeah,
you understand the what's going on better. So
yeah,
I think when you hear a question and you even jot down that first key word, what or revoke or ramifications, you see it on the paper, you remember to answer the question. Because I
yeah.
think the most annoying thing, even in advocacy, we hear it repeated to us all the time is, okay, when you get judicial intervention, remember to answer the question. And
Mhm.
it sounds like a small point. It sounds like, okay, we know comprehension here, we will answer the question. But
Mhm.
sometimes we actually don't. We just
absolutely, you get consumed in your own, like, what I was saying was good, and and you forget to sort of listen, and yeah, it doesn't bode well. And it's exactly the same thing as when you are giving an answer yourself and you say, I've got 3 points to make, and then you give 2 points and you don't give the third, and the interviewers, you'll see they'll sit there like, okay. And then so literally, again, just write down the numbers 1, 2, 3, and you'll remember, oh yeah, I had 3 points. Yeah, it's easy stuff like that it just sort of like polishes your interview in a way, and that's the whole point, isn't it? It's polishing yourself.
Yeah, of course. And I know too, many of the times, after you say you're successful in that first round interview, many people have to go through a second round interview. Do you think there
Mm.
are any additional tips that people should be aware of? Because I know sometimes chambers, depending on the chambers, tends
Mm.
to use that interview as the advocacy session.
Absolutely, yeah. You're completely right. It's so the vast majority of the places that I did second rounds at, the second interview was almost entirely advocacy based, and sometimes they'll ask ethical questions as well. So have a reread of your BSB handbook. Be on top of that, and they'll ask a question, most likely in the second interview, might be in the first, that gets you in an ethical predicament that's actually not got a straight answer. So it won't be something like, who is your primary duty to? Because everyone knows that. It'll be something where it could go either way, and they just want to see how your brain works. They want to see that you're not you don't think sort of in an unethical way. So break it down. Don't be afraid of the fact that it doesn't seem to be a clear answer, and take them through logically how you've got to what you think the solution is. And make sure it is defensible, and you present it in a defensible way. So that's one thing. And then the advocacy, yeah, like if you're applying for crime, you normally will do a plea mitigation or bail application. Other places have various other things. I know some family places do applications for non-molestation orders, that they expect you to make, or things like that. Sometimes some of my civil friends, it was application for summary judgment or for an interim freezing order, or whatever it may be, interim injunction. Uh, and that's so you kind of want to be on top of the basics of that. You don't want to have swallowed necessarily the whole bail act, for example, or the whole white book if you're applying for civil stuff. You just need to know generally how to do it. They're not testing you on your knowledge of the law. They expect you to have a basic understanding of the grounds for bail, for example, the basic grounds. I've never seen anyone have it for the complex grounds. It's always the three basic ones. But they want to see that you are that you can apply it to the facts and you can argue it in a sensible way. So that's the kind of second round. Now, tips. Know that when you get to the second round, you've effectively, a lot of the time, for a lot of chambers, that means you're good enough for pupillage. You've got, so I'm told at least, you've got through the paper sift, you've got through the first round, they like you on paper, they like you in person. The second round is because there are also 10 other people that they like, and they can only pick 3. So that's something that should sort of imbue a bit of confidence in you, I suppose. And also kind of use it to your advantage in that don't change from your first interview, because they obviously like that and they like what they see on paper. So don't sort of try and reinvent yourself. Just carry on projecting what you have been before and continue that through. Um, yeah, have crib sheets is a big thing. So again, I'm going to talk about crime because that's what I was doing, but I set out in crib sheets my plea and mitigation and my bail application, and it was just kind of like point 1, 2, 3. It is submitted that, and then the kind of ground that I was going to argue or whatever, and then on the bottom of it I'd have the grounds for applying for bail and the conditions that you might attach to bail. The same with plea and mitigation, the kind of the references to the common guidelines in my Blackstone's book, and the general structure of how you should carry out a plea and mitigation. So first of all, guidelines, then personal mitigation with a sort of header at the start, and unless I can assist any further at the end, just to remind you to ask that. They are key. You save so much time because second interviews are always time pressured. They will give you half an hour or something for prep, and then you get called in, and that's it. So if you can save 5 minutes in having that written out in advance, or knowing where everything is that you possibly will need in this crib sheet, do it. It took me one morning to make both of them, and that was whilst I was doing the bar course. So I was kind of like, I had it all at my fingertips already, but I inserted it into a crib sheet, and I didn't do it for my first interview. I had a mentor that told me to do it, try it for my second round interview, and things were so much easier. So yeah, that's a big thing that you can, and that's a top tip. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful as well too, because even when we're practicing our advocacy, structure is so important. And the mere fact that you have a template, because what you're effectively advising is a template. If you have a template, you can insert all the relevant information in a
Mm,
timely fashion and have a structured submission. So
mm,
I think structure is very important, and in nerves, when you're nervous, structure can just go through the door. So I'm gonna start here, and then I'm gonna go here, and then you're just jumping all over the place, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah,
It's kind of in a haphazard way,
yeah.
and somehow you tend to lose how persuasive you can be.
Hmm, hmm.
So in terms of rejection, unfortunately, this is something that we do have to talk about, because we won't all get pupillage on the first round. I know you were speaking about taking up paralegal roles or maybe other legal roles. How do
Mm,
you think, I know that you didn't have to experience this, but how do you think students could start filling the gap and maybe kind of preparing for rejection without being negative?
yeah,
How can students have a realistic mindset?
yeah. Well, just know that it's a super competitive thing. Everyone goes through rejection. There's something like um, a few hundred, a couple of hundred. I think it's like 300 pupils a year, and over 2,000 or 3,000 people applying for them. You are statistically more likely to not get pupillage than to get it. Um, it each and every year that you apply. So you have to bear that in mind. You have to apply for enough chambers that without applying for too many, like we were saying earlier, enough chambers that it gives you a realistic prospect of of trying to get it. And know that every time you apply, there will be rejection. I have never heard of anybody applying for more than sort of like a few sets and getting clean offers through with every single set that they apply for. It just doesn't. Even the best candidates, it just doesn't happen. So accept that accept before you even apply, you will be rejected, and you will be rejected by chambers that you think that you stand a really good chance of getting an interview at. That you think you nailed the application and you did really well and you're everything that they're looking for, or at least that they say that they're looking for, and you'll get rejected. And it happens, and we all go through it, and you sat there scratching your head thinking like, what else could I have done? And that brings me on to the point, is that um if you are unlucky, and it is a lot of luck, if I'm being honest, if you are unlucky and you don't get pupillage that cycle, have a look at where you can flesh out your CV. Have a look at where the gaps are. Ask for feedback. If you're Ask every single chambers that you get rejected for on paper or in person for feedback, unless they specifically say we don't give feedback. And get it. If it takes a while, send them another email and say, I'm just waiting for feedback. If that's still okay, please. Take that feedback on board. Go back to any mentors that you might have and ask them to pull out your CV, your application and give some feedback on where any holes might be, and work on those holes. So for me, when I was going through them, I remember someone even said in interview, I got feedback in interview. Someone said, "You've not got much actual advocacy experience, so have you?" And I remember thinking to myself, that's really hard to get actual advocacy experience, like real, not mooting, which I did, but real advocacy experience as a 24-year-old that's applying to the bar and doesn't yet have pupillage. Where else do you get advocacy experience? And I had several options, and I was trying to line that up just in case I didn't get it. So the schools exclusion project's one, free representation units another, paralegaling, and being so what I did was I was a police station representative. That's another where you can get sort of advocacy experience in doing that. So have a look at where your gaps are, and then have a fish around and see what kind of thing you can do for the next year or for the next few months that might fill that gap. And that's the best thing that you can do, that kind of targeted improvement. Don't just go away and do a master's, especially if you've already got like a really good degree. If you've got a solid sort of 2-1 or a first, you've done okay in the bar course, you've got a VC or an outstanding, very competent or outstanding, you don't necessarily need to do a master's. Really, do one if you want to, but target your improvements at where your holes are. And accept that you are not the best judge at, well, most of the time at least, I definitely wasn't the best judge at knowing where your gaps are. Let other people tell you and see where the kind of critical mass of feedback is.
No, that's very helpful, and I think that's where the careers advisors come in, because I know sometimes some universities offer services even after you've graduated for a particular time period where you can still access the careers department. And even on the course, there are always the career department always ask you if you want to submit your CV to get reviewed and to get feedback, and so you can flag up basically what you need to work on, and things that you need to, those gaps that really need to be filled.
Yeah.
So that's super helpful. Now,